Hello, welcome to our study of the Apocalypse, and we are on chapter 17. Now, we're only going to go through verses 1 through 8 because this chapter is just packed with gems and just beautiful literary analogies here. A lot of beautiful symbolism, I should say. Now, one thing you need to know about chapter 17 is it echoes a lot of the Old Testament. And it's a big echo from Jeremiah 50 and 51, which the prophet indicts Babylon. So this is the narrative about the whore of Babylon we're going to be looking at. And the reason she's called a whore is because God depicted Israel as his bride. When we read Ezekiel chapter 23, I think it is, it deals with the two adulterous sisters, the divided kingdom, Israel and Judah. And he calls them adulterers. Now, when he only uses this word for Israel, for his people, when he charges, or at least in relationship with him, spiritually, committing spiritual adultery is only used for Israel. Now, when he calls other countries, like the king of Tyre or others, charges them with adultery, it usually is in context of their socioeconomic type dealings, where they're prostituting themselves to the whole world, and he's indicting them for their, questionable trades, we would say, economic trades. So the language here is now spanned out to the whole world. And that it spans out to the whole world suggests that God has made himself known to the whole world, and now the whole world is held accountable to him. He has revealed his purposes and his plans and his love to the whole world. So now the whole world stands under the indictment of God himself. It also suggests that God has laid claim to the whole world. So now let's begin with reading verse 1. One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, now let me pause right there. He's echoing chapter 15 verse 1, which says, I saw in heaven another great and marvelous sign, seven angels with the seven last plagues. So that he's directly echoing chapter 15, which is the plagues of the bowls, the last set of plagues, which brought the end of the world. So he is recapitulating chapter 15, and he's going to retell again, in recapitulation fashion, the end of the world. It's also recapitulating chapter 6, at the sixth seal, where you have the mountains and the islands fall from their places, and the sky rolls up like a scroll, and that's, it's also the seventh seal, where you have the ending really brought about. It recapitulates the seventh trumpet, where it says the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord in Christ. It recapitulates chapter 14, verses 14 through 20, which is the harvest of the earth, where the righteous are harvested and then the wicked. So it is depicting the indictment, the judgment, and the destruction of the world. Now let me say something, because some of you have probably heard that the whore of Babylon is a symbol of Rome. It says down here in verse 9, the seven heads or seven heels on which the woman sits. And so people want to say, oh, that's Rome, because Rome was known for having seven heels. But Rome in itself becomes a symbol, a larger symbol of the world. Just like in chapter 11, Sodom and Egypt become symbols. So every country that's listed in itself becomes a symbol. So what she depicts is the socioeconomic, cultural, and religious aspects of this world that stand in opposition to God. So this is, you can put it this way, we'll get to that in a minute. Let me not get ahead of myself. It is a global enterprise. It is the world in opposition to God. Every institution that's in opposition to God. So next it says, come and I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute. That he says come is a direct quote, direct allusion to Genesis chapter 11, the Tower of Babel. This is the beginning of Babel. The Tower of Babel is the birth of the whore, the beginning of Babylon. And it says here in verse 3, come, let's make bricks. Then verse 4 says, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower that reaches to the heavens so that we might make a name for ourselves. See how pompous and arrogant they were at Babel? Then it says, God says, come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not be able to understand each other. So there's 3 times it says come. So that it says come is directly echoing Babel. It also is an echo from Exodus, the very beginning of Exodus. Let me get there. It says, come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become as more numerous as us and go to war and join their enemies and fight against us. So that's echoing Exodus as well and drawing in on that spiritual warfare, that conflict between the world and the people of God. But the main allusion is to the Tower of Babel. And I want to come back to this and look at this. So in this narrative, they built the first idolatrous city, the first organized idolatrous city. Shingar, where it is, it says that they built it in the plain of Shinar. Shinar means gateway to the gods. So what they believe that they did here, which was done during this time period, they have found this in archaeological digs, that they built a tower, and at the top was what's called a ziggurat. And a ziggurat hosted a temple that was a window, an invitation for the gods to come down. So this is the first organized city of idolatry. That is why Babel that is why she's called the whore of Babylon in chapter 17. She's the one who spread idolatry throughout the world. She's charged with the spread of idolatry, I should say. That she is scattered, it says in Genesis, that they might make a name for themselves and not be scattered over the face of the earth. So they didn't want to be scattered. They knew that there's later in Exodus, we find that in disobedience, God says, I will scatter you. So there must have already been some sort of understanding that disobedience to God, that the punishment will be scattering. Okay? You can find that in Exodus. I didn't put down the text beside it, but you can look it up. So their punishment for idolatry was to be scattered across the earth. And that God came down to confuse their language. It's as if to say, if you're not going to be in right relationship with me, then you're not going to be in right relationship with each other. In other words, if you're not going to be in right relationship with me, your relationships with one another is going to be conflicting. So that's the punishment. The punishment for not having the vertical relationship right is going to bring hostility and awkwardness in your horizontal relationships. I think that is very true. So, come and I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute. So this is about the punishment of the world. This is God's judicial action against the world. That she's called great is interesting. Throughout Scripture we see that, throughout the Apocalypse I should say, we see that the dragon in chapter 12 was called great. We see that the beast out of the sea made great boast and great blasphemy. There's a lot of things called great throughout the Apocalypse that's not so great. God is never called great, but his deeds are called great, and he is called almighty. But it says this, she's called great because she's pretentious, just like the dragon. They're pretenders to the throne. And so they're presenting themselves as great, although they're not really great. It's all pretentious. That's all a challenge to the throne of God. It says, who sits on many waters. That she sits implies that she is confident. She sits in confidence and in a position of authority. She's comfortable. That she sits on many waters, it tells us in verse 15 of that same chapter, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are people, multitudes, nations, and languages. So she rules over the world. She has a global kingdom. She has built a global enterprise. And she sits as queen, we're going to see, over this. So it's over the world. So her spear is not limited to Rome. No, it's the whole world is what she represents. Verse 2. With her, kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. So this is packed. With her, since the kings, it says the kings of the earth. So the kings of the earth are her clients. they commit adultery with her. They engage in, we say, spiritual fornication with the whore. So this is saying that the sphere of her influence, this worldly system, the toxic culture, has reached to the elite parliaments. It has reached to governments and has polluted those governments. So the kings of the earth represent governments ruling, being corrupted by the ways of the world. They have committed adultery with her. So now God is laying claim to the world. Say, the world was mine. I have made known to the world my love, and I have made a way for salvation to redeem the world. So what was before reserved for Israel, being charged with committed adultery, is now charged to the whole world. So God is laying claim to the whole world and saying the whole world and its people are mine. And these people have all committed idolatry and have rejected me. And now they're going to be judged and punished for that. It says here, and the inhabitants of the earth, which is the earth dwellers. Okay? So with her, the kings of the earth committed adultery and the inhabitants of the earth. That leaves the rest of us. That chose, the rest of the world who chose to not follow, besides the elite. So the earth dwellers so far, we found that the souls under the altar in chapter 10 cried out for justice against the earth dwellers. The eagle flying in midair pronounced a woe upon the earth dwellers in chapter 8 and verse 13. In chapter 11 and verse 10, the earth dwellers celebrated the murder of the two witnesses. In chapter 13 and 8, the earth dwellers worshiped the beast out of the sea. The beast out of the land will make people worship the beast in chapter 13. That's the earth dwellers. Okay? In chapter 12 and verse 12, there's a woe pronounced upon the earth dwellers. So we see that the earth dwellers are very specifically labeled and looked at as those who have committed idolatry and those who have persecuted the people of God. It's the people who have bought into the intoxicating culture of the whore. And in fact, it says here, the kings of the earth who committed adultery and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adultery. So it's implying that her influence upon the world has been intoxicating. It has, people have drank of her intoxicating concoction, and now their senses have been dulled. And they're behaving silly, we would say. You know, somebody has too much to drink, their behavior changes. So it has affected their behavior. They drank of her intoxicating with it says here, the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. So the whole world is being charged as committing adultery with God. It says in verse 3, then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert. Okay, that this is a desert is telling. A desert is a desolate environment. So think of this world. This world in opposition to God or divorced from God is like a desert. It's kind of desolate. There's not a lot of spiritual giving life. Okay, there's no spirit-giving life in this culture. It's in the church, so it's desolate. Why else would she be in the desert? She's in the desert because in chapter 12, where were the people of God? Where was the woman who was clothed with the sun, who the dragon was pursuing? She was given wings to fly to a desert, it says in chapter 12. That's 12 and... let's see, 12 and verse 14. The woman was given two wings like an eagle, like a great eagle, so that she might fly to a place prepared for her in the desert. So the whore of Babylon is in the desert hunting. She's hunting down the people of God. A desert also is a symbol of God's curse. Deuteronomy chapter 28. And verse 23. Says, The sky, this is talking about if they're disobedient. This is the curses of disobedience against Israel. And it says, the sky over your head will be bronze, the ground beneath you iron. The Lord will turn the rain of your country into dust and powder. It will come down from the skies until you are destroyed. So it talks about the curse will be that your land is going to become desolate. It's the same thing in Jeremiah 23. We find a similar indictment against them, where it says in verse 10, the land is full of adulterers. Because of the curse, the land lies parched, and the pastures of the desert are withered. The prophets follow an evil course and use their power unjustly. So because they have chosen to divorce themselves from God, their land is going to be a desert. So the author, John, inspired by the Spirit, is describing the whore as dwelling in a place of desert land, a desolate place, and it is a cursed place. Thirdly, about the desert, Isaiah likened the kingdom of Babylon to Satan, who made the world a desert. That's Isaiah chapter 13, verses 12 and following. It says, I will make man scarcer than pure gold, and rarer than the gold of Ophir. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will shake from its place at the wrath of the Lord God Almighty in the day of his burning anger. And it goes on and it begins to describe what that is like. I'm not going to read all of that. But it depicts the world as a desolate desert. Okay, next it says in verse 3, There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. Okay, that she's sitting suggests that she is sitting as a queen, as royalty. I think of verse 14 of chapter 14. It says that the Son of Man was sitting on a cloud, right? So it is suggesting rulership here. So she sits as a queen. Remember in chapter 14 and verse 6 it says, Then I saw an angel flying in midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who sit on the earth. So that they sit on the earth, and that the whore sits on the beast, and that they're also said in verse 15, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits, okay, suggests that they are one, that the people of the world are one with the whore, and they're sitting in complacency under her rule. And the woman is sitting on the beast as though it's a throne. And that she's on a scarlet beast suggests that she has aligned herself with the beast that comes out of the sea. And that it's a scarlet beast suggests that they both are aligned with the dragon that was the great scarlet dragon of chapter 12. And it says, Then I saw the woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. So what this is depicting is totalitarian government, oligarchs, okay, the oligarchs of the world who dictate to the rest of us. So this is depicting that, as well as the the toxic culture of this world. And it's covered, she's sitting upon the beast that was covered with blasphemous names. So this is an antichrist beast, an antichrist culture. She's aligned herself and has influenced this. She has built a global enterprise around this toxic anti-God agenda. And has 7 heads. The beast had 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, that's going to suggest a claim to sovereignty, a claim to deity. 7 represents complete or perfection. Heads represents the place of authority. Horns represent power. So there's 10 horns represents complete power. So she is challenging God, who has ultimate authority and ultimate power. And she is sitting in his place on the beast, like it's her throne, sitting above the people, nations, languages, and tongues of the world as a queen. Verse 4, the woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, and glittering with gold and precious stones and pearls. Now we're going to get into some really deep territory. Okay, so this garments that she's wearing is suggestive of the high priest in Exodus chapter 28. Yes. Verse 16 says, fasten a breastplate for making decisions, the work of a skillful craftsman. Make it an ephod of gold, purple, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and a finely twisted linen. Well, it says, what's verse 17? Then mount 4 rows of precious stones on it. And in the first row, and it starts telling all the stones that were mounted to the ephod, which the priest used. So that she is wearing purple and scarlet and precious stones is suggesting her influence into the world of religion, into her influence in the church. Okay, it's false religion. She's directly she has, put it this way, is directly responsible for influencing the church of Thyatira and its idolatry with the woman Jezebel, with the church of Pergamum and its influence with the Balaam worship. She's directly behind all of this infiltrating of these 7 churches with some of the churches, not all of them had heretical teachings, but the Nicolaitans that were charged, the ones who had taught with the Nicolaitan doctrine, she's behind all of that false teaching that penetrates the church. She represents false religion. Purple is suggestive of royalty. And we are the priesthood of all believers. That's why there was purple in the garments, to represent the priesthood. Scarlet represents the blood. So she is offering a false redemption and a false position of authority. That blue is missing is telling. It tells that blue represents the heavenly origin. So she does not have a heavenly origin. So blue is not named in her garments. That she's glittering with gold. Gold represents deity. So she's glittering with gold. She is parodying and challenging the title of deity. She's presenting herself as God. Isn't that what our culture does? It sets itself up and it's glittering with gold. It reminds me of the signs when you go into a big city. Just look at me, look at me, look at me. Precious stones. She's mimicking the high priest. See? This is beautiful. And then the pearls are telling, because in the New Jerusalem, when we get to chapter 21 and 22, we get the New Jerusalem, her gates are made of pearls. Single pearls. So she is depicting a false gateway to salvation. She held a golden bowl in her hand, a golden cup in her hand. Well, the golden cups or golden bowls were used in the service. They were used to hold the incense. Okay? They were used in a lot of the worship services. So she's mimicking religion. It's a false religion. And her cup is filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. So in her cup is abominable things. It doesn't have wine. It doesn't have what we would expect. Instead, it's abominable things, and it's filled with her adulteries. In other words, she's depicted as having this golden cup, and she's offering to the people, nations, languages, and tongues to sip of her adulteries, to sip of her idolatries, to sip of her sexual immoralities. It's the enticement of the world. And it says, filled with the abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. This title was written on her forehead. Oh, that we have the forehead. That is telling. What all has had a forehead so far? Well, let's see. There was 144,000 that were sealed on their foreheads. The mark of the beast was on the forehead. So we've seen other things about a forehead being mentioned. But here, her title is written on her forehead, indicating that she has no shame. She has her title. What is the title written on her forehead? Mystery. Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes. 3 titles are written on her head. I've got a... So she's considered a mystery, okay? She's considered Babylon the Great, so pretentious is there. She's depicting herself as great, although she's not great. Mother of prostitutes says that she has propagated herself. And let me just say this. If you let culture raise your kids, you're going to be wondering what happened. The whore does not make a good babysitter. I'm going to say that again. The whore does not make a good babysitter. If you let culture raise your kids, they're going to come out looking just like her, because the prostitute has recreated herself. She has disciples. She has children. She has propagated and nurtured and raised them to be just like her. Isaiah, I'm going to go to Isaiah 14 and 22. I was about to say turn to it, but you don't have to do that. It says in 14:22, I will rise up against them, declares the Lord Almighty, and will cut off from Babylon her name and survivors and her offspring and her descendants. And that is what God is doing. He is cutting down Babylon. He is cutting down the whore, and her descendants will come down with her. This punishment of the whore. It's the world system that's in opposition to God again. Let me read, backing up a little bit, let me read about the cup, the golden cup in her hand. Let me read chapter 51 of Isaiah in 21 through 22. Therefore hear this, you afflicted one, made drunk but not with wine. That's what she does. This is what the Lord says, your God, who defends his people. See, I have taken out of your hand the cup that makes you stagger. From that cup, the goblet of my wrath, you will never drink again. I will put it into the hands of your tormentors, who said to you, fall prostrate, that we might walk all over you. And you made your back like the ground, like the street, to be walked over. So it's depicting the world as a whore. Again, it's playing off of this. And this cup that makes her stagger, drinking of the abominations of the world. So that was from Isaiah chapter 51, 21 and 22, and that was under the cup of the Lord's wrath. Okay, verse 6. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints. So she is drunk, but it's not with wine, and it's not even with her abominations, but it's with the blood of the saints. Once again, where has she been hunting? In the desert. This tells us that her goal is the martyrdom of the saints. Her goal is to target the saints. This tells us about spiritual conflict once again. So we are thrust back into that spiritual warfare. And let me say this again. She's the one who is behind the martyrdom of the saints in Smyrna, Philadelphia, the martyrdom of Antipas, who was martyred, and also the souls under the altar of chapter 6 and verse 9 who were crying out for justice. She is the one, this toxic culture, the whore of Babylon, is the one who is behind the persecution of the saints. And that is why she is being judged, we're told. When I saw her, wait, let me say this. Whoops, I skipped a line. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints. The blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. Now we've got a clarity. Not just any professing Christian. No, it's those who bear testimony to Jesus. Those who are real Christians that is being mentioned here. Real Christians that she's coming after. She could care less. You can say you're a Christian all day long, but that's not a threat. That doesn't matter. Then the angel said to me, why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that she rides, and of the 7 heads and the 10 horns. So he's going to explain the mystery. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and will come up out of the abyss and go to his destruction. Okay, so this is parodying Christ, who said, who is, who was, and who is to come. Again, she is trying to mimic Christ. And will come up is the Greek word parousia. Parousia is the fancy word for the coming of the Lord. The coming of the Lord, when he comes, is called the parousia of Christ, the second coming of Christ. So he is mimicking and parroting Jesus Christ, who once was, who is, and who will come. Up out of the abyss. He's not coming from heaven. He's coming from the abyss, where the beast came up out of the sea. Where's the abyss? In the sea. The locust invasion came up out of the abyss. So we have this abyss is associated with the sea and with evil. And we'll go to his destruction. The inhabitants of the earth dwellers, that is. I think 3 times in this section it says earth dwellers in all of this, whose names have not been written in the book of life. We got clarity now. Again, there's real Christians and there's fake Christians. There's a true church and there's a pseudo church. Will be astonished. So he says here that those whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world will be astonished when they see the beast, because he once was, now is not, and is yet to come. So next we're going to see in a few minutes that John is astonished, and they're trying to figure out why are you astonished, because he just said that those whose names are not written in the book are the ones who are astonished. But John finds himself astonished when he sees this image, and it could be that he's astonished because she's dressed like a queen, and she has this cup of filth. Yeah. So this is an image of socio-economic, cultural, and religious, and judicial even aspects of this world that stand in opposition to God, and she has propagated a following. We might call it a family tradition, if you will. Let me say this. She is a contrast to the woman clothed with the sun and the 144,000 and the virgins. So she's a contrast to those. The stones, let me add this in. When we talk about the stones, the precious stones that she is wearing, there's also an allusion in chapter 28 of Ezekiel, and it is depicting the king of Tyre like Satan. And it names those stones that were upon him. So this could be dual. Mimicking the high priest, trying to look like she's all, religious when she's not, or whatever. But also could be in alignment with Satan. You can look at that yourself. Well, it's verse 13. You were in the Garden of Eden. Every precious stone adorned you: ruby, topaz, emerald, chrysolite, onyx, jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and beryl. So Satan also had stones. Okay? So I think that's pretty much everything. That's a pact. That's a lot in just those little 8 verses. And I'm just hitting the high points. So maybe you can take the time and study that out yourself. Relook at some of those scriptures. It's absolutely a brilliant literature. I think it is a brilliant metaphor to depict this toxic culture, this socio-economic toxic world as a drunk whore riding a 7-headed dragon. Just brilliant. So I hope you enjoy the study, and thank you for listening. God bless.